Welcome back. So, what I want to do is I want to have three main environments. So, I want to have the make file where I can run the front end and the back end separately if for any reason I want to do that. And then with the Docker environment here, I want to have both a dev Docker and a production Docker that I can use. And they're going to be very similar. They're only going to be differing by one or two commands. And I found a pretty cool way of doing that using a new command in Docker I didn't really know about called extends. So let's get into it. Before getting into using the actual extends command, what I wanted to do is I wanted to take this CLI command that I'm using, and we can use Fastapi. I didn't know this when I first made this. Fastapi actually has their own CLI that they can use, so we can use UV run Fastapi, and then they have both dev if you want to run dev, and run will put it into production. So for this we'll use dev because we're going to say if you run Docker Compose by default, then it just runs the development environment. And we'll just do route. Alright, now the way that extends is going to work is we're going to define all of our Docker services. So basically everything that we have right here. We're going to put that into a separate YAML file. And then from here, we can just instead call extends up here. So this is what it'll look like is we'll basically copy this, make a new file, just call it docker common.yaml. Does need to be a YAML file. And okay, we have everything in there. And then, so for the services, for the backend service, we need to define the actual service name up here. But instead of defining all of this, what we can simply do is just extends. Yep, IntelliSense got it. Yeah, I only need to type out a few things in that. Okay, great. And the one thing I did say too is that the volume does actually need to be defined in the Docker Compose still, because the extents only exists under the services command right here. So that also means that in the common file, we don't need to have this up here. Okay, now we want to make a Docker Compose production file. I moved my head to the other side so that hopefully you can see it from there. So we'll go up here, we'll create a new file in the root directory and call it docker compose.prod.yaml. And what we'll do is when we want to run it in more of a production environment, we'll run this file instead. Have that override a regular Docker Compose. So this is pretty much going to be the same thing, except instead of Fastapi dev, I'm going to do Fastapi run for the back end. And then for the front end as well, I'm going to run Streamlit like normal. But instead, what I want to do to show that it's working, first of all, is the toolbar that we have here. This command will override it so that it disappears when we're running it in production. And in order to make sure that's working, come up here to the Streamlit config. Since we already have this here in our config file, I'll just remove that so that when we're in production, we'll still see that little Streamlit running man type thing. Alright, so now if we run this guy, if we do docker compose up, this is the development command, right? So let's see what we get. Alright, so I just have it in half screen here, but you see that we have this little 3-dot menu back. Okay, get that out of the way. And then, so quit out of this. And the way to run this in using this new file is we'll use Docker compose, and then we'll say -f and Docker compose dot prod dot YAML, then up. Okay, now we'll bring back over, refresh. And as you can see, we don't have that running anymore. So that kind of proves that it's working. So this is a nifty little way to what I wanted to kind of do was make a common thing here, because I didn't want to make just a separate compose file and redefine everything that we have, because that leads us into a situation where if we want to change anything in here, like say run it on a different port or something, then we have to do that in however many compose files that we have. So this just makes it a little easier to manage. Alright, the last thing is I noticed, since probably a restriction this whole thing, that we don't have a readme file on the main directory anymore. And what I usually like to do is whenever they're like readme.me readme.md whenever there are like arbitrary commands to remember, I like to put that in a readme. Just I don't have the best memory, so it's nice if the computer can remember for me. Alright, so I think that about wraps it up. This was just a short one to show you that little tip. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.